Welcome to our tutorial on using ChatGPT for data analytics. Today we're going to show you how to harness the power of this state-of-the-art language model to perform a variety of data analytics tasks, from data cleaning to natural language processing. Let's get started. If you haven't heard about ChatGPT, where have you been hiding?
ChatGPT.
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 ChatGPT, a language model created by OpenAI, has the ability to respond to prompts in a human-like manner.
ChatGPT is a large language model which is taking the internet by storm. So with that in mind, we're trying something different, and we'll give you our take on it and how it can be useful to data analysts. Let's first cover what ChatGPT is on a deeper level and how does it work. Okay, we have ChatGPT, which is basically just a word prediction model. All of this craziness can be boiled down into 4 steps. Step number 1, you take the internet, websites like Reddit, Wikipedia, Quora, and you download that into a large language model, LLM. And that model trains on this language data like the grammar of the language, code patterns. Step number 2, example sentences from what is CF. Sentences translated into something. And those word embeddings are fed into. In summary, ChatGPT is just a machine learning model that gets really, really good at guessing the information that's on the internet. And it sounds a lot like human speech. Caveat, OpenAI haven't released this information publicly, so most of us are just guessing as to how this works. Okay, that's enough of the background. Let's see if we can actually find out how ChatGPT can be used to help data analysts do their job better. In fact, why don't we just get ChatGPT to write out some of the examples for us? Apart from my typos, you'll see that I'm writing in a very natural style. The main thing to point out is that I asked it in the first sentence to act as a data analyst. It's important to use prompts like act as or behave like to get the output tailored for the kind of content that you want. As we're beginner data analysts, we're trying to make sure that it's outputting beginner data analytics stuff. Future Tom here. Why don't you research a little bit more into prompts? Writing a good prompt will get the best out of ChatGPT. And we've included a link in the description to some of the best prompts for data analysts out there. Back to the video. And the answer is fantastic. Obviously, it's writing natural language. It's very easy to understand and the output is fast. Each time it gives you a different answer. That's part of the inherent randomness of the large language models like ChatGPT is you never get the same answer twice. We have 5 main points. Each of them are good. I think we should try and test ChatGPT a little bit more by diving into 1 or 2 of these main points. I don't think we'll focus on the first point, defining the problem or question. It's a little bit too general. I want to get more specific. So let's go into step number 2, gathering and preparing the data, and step number 3, exploring the data. And ChatGPT literally tells me it can help us by identifying relevant data sources and providing information on available databases or websites. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it, can it recommend any easy data sources for a beginner data analyst? And let's see what it does. And straight away I get some fantastic answers. Top of the list is Kaggle, which, if you know from watching some of our previous videos on open data sources, is one of our top recommendations as well. So definitely doing a good job there. Number 2 is also on our list. And for each example, it's providing a good explanation of why it's good. So that's fantastic. Okay, I think what I'm gonna do is briefly stop working with ChatGPT, go ahead, go to Kaggle as it's recommended, and grab one of the free data sets. I'll pick a very simple data set so the beginners amongst you can follow what we're doing. And I think what we'll do is try and input some of that data into ChatGPT and see if it can give us any recommendations for how to analyze that data and explore that data, which is the second point in its recommendations for how to work with data analytics projects. Okay, so I've got the data from Kaggle, from Titanic. I'm now going to throw it into ChatGPT, and part of the second step that ChatGPT suggested was to explore the data quality, so to look for things like duplicate data, missing information. So I'm going to throw it in and ask ChatGPT if it can help me to understand the quality of the data. And now I paste the data in, and immediately it recognizes that it's from the Titanic. So it obviously knows what it's talking about. It's describing the number of variables. For beginners, that means the number of columns in your spreadsheet. And for each column, it is telling me the column name, which is great, and it's providing an explanation of the column. Now, I haven't had to provide any information about that column, so it's literally guessing probably from the column header name and also from the data inside it what a good description of each column would be. So great job. And now it's gone on to the data quality. So I've specifically asked it to analyze the data quality, and it's highlighted that there are some missing values specifically for the age column and the cabin column. It's providing an explanation about why that might be, explanations as to why the cabin variable in particular has missing data. It's explaining that from a historical perspective, some of the tickets didn't contain cabin information. So not only does it understand the data set, but it understands the historical context about the data set. So fantastic. I mean, what I would say is that Titanic is one of the most famous data sets out there. So it's definitely going to know about this. If you provided a more specific use case, perhaps your own business data, then maybe it wouldn't be able to make such good guesses. And it closes by telling me how we can do analytics on this particular data set. So we can examine factors that influences passenger survival, for example. Okay, so let's move on to step 3, which is to explore the data. Now, you can tell that we've already done some exploration in the previous step from ChatGPT, but I'd like to go into more of the statistics side of things. So as ChatGPT says, in this step, we can use descriptive statistics or visualizations to help us to understand the data better. So let's see if ChatGPT can produce descriptive statistics. I know it can't produce visualizations. I will ask it though, nonetheless, to see what it says. So it's outputting a description of the data types for each column. And it's saying, for example, in the survived column, it's a binary variable. And it's describing the proportion of passengers who survived. So that binary variable, as expressed as a percentage, means that 38% of the passengers survived. All of this is very useful. It's helping me to understand the data that I do have. What it's not doing is telling me how I could do these steps myself. So what I might do is just take one of these particular columns that it's provided some statistics for and ask ChatGPT how I, as a beginner data analyst, could obtain that information myself on a new data set. And let's see what it says. Yeah, I've asked it how to do that, and it's immediately outputting Python code. Seems like Python is probably the default programming language in ChatGPT. It's defining a function. It's written a really great doc string, which for beginners amongst you is just a piece of text that explains what the function is doing, what the acceptable inputs to that function are, and what the normal output to that function would be. So that's really good code practice. And that function looks great. It's also providing an example of how to use that function in practice. Okay, but let's remember this is for beginners. So not all of this Python code is going to be familiar to you. So let's ask it to help us understand the contents of this basic function in a little more detail. It's taking a while to answer. I can't believe I've thrown it off. It's probably more likely there's a high volume of traffic right now. Interestingly, the code type that's at the top of the code block is changing from Python to Ruby. And currently it's saying that this is Ruby code. It's definitely not Ruby code, it's Python. So I don't know why that's happening, but that's an interesting minor issue. It's fixed itself now. So I think the more it writes actual code, the more it understands what the code base of that code block is. Okay, so what it's actually done rather than explaining the code is rewritten the code for me. It's rewritten it in a much simpler version and using variable names that are very intuitive for a human to understand. Now it's providing a breakdown of specifically what's happening. Okay, so it stopped generating the code there. It looked like it was timing out for some reason. So I had to stop it from generating. I'm gonna ask it the same question again and see if it does a better job this time. Right, it looks like we're not able to ask any more questions in this particular thread. I think what I'm gonna do is just take the data source that I initially fed in and open a new chat and just try and continue the conversation in that thread. Okay, so I pasted the code into the new chat. I've asked it to explain the data quality and any data types, and then I've pasted exactly the same data in. It's phrased it in a different way, but it knows that it's the Titanic data set. It's done a perfect job of explaining all the column names, just like last time. And this shows the inherent randomness of the output. I'll never get the same answer twice from ChatGPT. I also asked it, I told it that I was planning on performing exploratory data analysis. So it's preempted my question by telling me what sort of analysis I could do on this data set. So it's recommended calculating some basic descriptive statistics, like the mean, median, and standard deviation. For the numerical variables, those are the columns with numbers in them. And then some frequency tables for the categorical variables, those are the ones with like text or names in them. Let's ask ChatGPT to write us a function to do that. It's written the function very simply for me. It's using a pandas function which outputs all of the descriptive statistics. So it's not reinventing the wheel, it's using pre-written solutions, which is an elegant approach. And then it's showing me how to call that function in real life. So it's really taken a lot of complexity away from me. What it's not done in this function is provide an explanation of what that function is doing. So I'm going to ask it to rewrite the function. I'm going to ask it to include a docstring, which we already talked about. It's an explanatory piece of text at the top of the function. And I might ask it to rewrite the function not using pandas, but instead using native code. This is not as elegant a solution, but it will help me to understand as a beginner data analyst exactly what sort of statistics are being calculated rather than just abstracting it away to another package. Okay. That seems to be working well. The docstring is fantastic. And as I asked, I'm getting comments for each line of code. It's not even using pandas, it's just expecting a list of lists. So that's the most basic data type you can have basically for large data sets in Python, just lists of numbers or lists of text or something like that. Clearly you can see that this function is a lot more complicated than the previous one. So you might be thinking, well, why are you writing it this way? It looks a lot more hard to understand, but it's because we're getting low-level information about how to calculate each of these numerical summarizations rather than abstracting that away to a function like pandas, which does it all for you in one line of code, but doesn't help you to understand it. Okay, so this looks great. It's further explaining the results at the end. So not just explaining in the function, but explaining afterwards in natural language. So as you can see, this model is actually really, really good. And I'm not alone in thinking that. The internet is full of fans of ChatGPT. Its ability to produce natural language output, human-style natural language output, is unparalleled. You might be aware of the Turing test. Well, in my opinion, it's basically passed the Turing test. So does that mean that we have artificial general intelligence now? Obviously not. What it means is we need new versions of the Turing test in order to be able to determine whether we've reached AGI or not. Outside of natural language, its ability to generate other things like code is amazing. And really, this is the first large language model that's been able to do other things than write code, for example, comment on code, refactor code, and optimize code. So I am, as a programmer, really happy to see a tool like this in use. ChatGPT is revolutionary tech. It's like Gmail autocomplete, but an order of magnitude better. It combines the best parts of Google search with the best parts of auto-completion to provide a revolutionary new tool that's gonna change the landscape for all of us. Okay, that last output was really impressive, but is it perfect? Can you just rely on ChatGPT and not worry about what it's producing? I don't think so. And lots of other people don't think so as well. Why don't you check out Jan LeCun? He's one of the senior data scientists at Facebook Meta, and he has lots of concerns. And they basically revolve around the same thing. ChatGPT is inherently random, which means it's very, very likely to produce the right output, but not guaranteed. And there is always a non-zero possibility that it's going to start outputting very confident, but very incorrect data. So in this next section, I'm gonna see if I can get it to try and trip itself up by asking it some more questions about the functions that it's just written. This might get a little advanced for the beginners amongst you, but trust me, it's not super complex. Right, my question is to ask it to compare and contrast the two approaches it just took, the pandas approach and the pure Python approach. I'm asking it what are the respective speeds of those two approaches and their accuracy, and please use big O notation in your answer. Okay, it's saying one is pandas based and one is pure Python based. That's exactly correct. It's saying pandas is more concise and convenient, but maybe slower for large data sets. The pure Python based approach, on the other hand, is more explicit and maybe faster for smaller data sets. Okay, so now it's giving me the big O complexity. The pandas based approach has a time complexity of ON. Yeah, that probably is correct. Pandas is optimized to perform operations on large data sets efficiently. Now, okay, well, that's interesting. It's immediately, I think, contradicting itself. In the first paragraph, it's saying that the pandas-based approach may be slower for large data sets. And then in the second paragraph, it says, pandas is optimized to perform operations on large data sets efficiently. And when I first saw that first paragraph, I was like, I actually think that pandas is using like vectorized operations underneath, which is like a very fast C-based implementation of like inputting and sorting through data. Whereas the pure Python-based approach, as the size of the data sets goes up, will be slower. Now, on a big O complexity perspective, it's saying pandas and Python both have ON, so that would imply that they are both as fast as each other. But I think this first and second paragraph has highlighted immediately an inconsistency. So how can I find out more about this inconsistency? Well, what I like to do is say to it, can you be sure? And then ask it to sort of double check what it's just said. Right now I'm asking it about the relative speeds of Python versus pandas. I'm saying I thought that pandas uses an efficient vectorized approach for data processing, which means that for large data sets, it should be more effective than the pure Python approach. Immediately, it says you are correct. Pandas can be more efficient for large data sets compared to pure Python due to its efficient vectorized operations, because pandas is built on top of NumPy, which, as a beginner data scientist, you should already know this. It then goes on to explain what that means. In my previous response, it says I was trying to highlight the difference in terms of algorithmic complexity between the two approaches and how it affects their performance as the size of the dataset grows. However, it's important to note that in practice, pandas can often outperform native Python. So it goes on to say, and that's possible when I was talking about the speeds of the approaches and their accuracy. Okay, so actually my question was specifically about the speeds of the approaches, but in its justification for why it sort of misspoke, it's talking about the fact that it was trying to explain it in terms of complexity. So I think we very quickly found out that it is kind of wrong about the facts of pure Python processing for large data sets versus pandas processing. But now I'm literally challenging it and saying, but I was asking about speed and your answer was in regards to complexity. So why weren't you trying to answer my question in regards to speed? Again, it says, you were correct. I apologize for the confusion in my previous answer. When it comes to speed, the pandas library can be faster for large data sets. Yes, it can be faster. It basically is faster for almost all practical use cases. And it explains again this vectorized operation where it's performing operations on entire arrays of data rather than doing looping over individual elements like pure Python would do. Yeah, now it's also talking about the fact that some sorting or grouping algorithms can have different complexity. And I agree with that. It's not always the case, but it reiterates the point that I was trying to make earlier. It sounds incredibly confident when you read that first paragraph. It definitely knows the answer, but just having a little bit of Python knowledge, I've been able to highlight the fact that it's essentially wrong. And even if it's not wrong, it's just confusing. And it can definitely mislead someone who's a beginner data analyst. So I think that's enough on that. We can conclude that you always need to be sure that you're verifying the information that ChatGPT is giving you. And if you want to check out further resources for that, I'll link some other articles in the description below. People like Stephen Wolfram, who's an amazing mathematician, has shown it to be very flawed on some basic facts about the real world. And there's a bunch of other articles as well about how you can trick and hack ChatGPT. As demonstrated in the video, not all the facts it produces are accurate, even though it sounds very confident about them. Some people have called ChatGPT a stochastic parrot. So, like a parrot, it's learned a lot of information from the internet or people, and it repeats it back in a way that sounds plausible. But in fact, it has no idea of the underlying meaning of the language, and consequently no idea of the factualness or veracity of the information that it's producing. Everything it says is statistically plausible. That means it sounds really good. It sounds like a human might be writing it, but that doesn't mean that it's correct. And consequently, it's easy to trick. And you can see this in two main areas. Area number one is in niche or unusual information. Unless it's a very common or obvious fact that's been written about in the same way lots of times, then it's unlikely to produce consistently a factual answer. It's clear from the example that I used, but you can also test it on basic facts. For example, ask it the distance between two cities that you're familiar with, and you'll find that the answer can be out by several hundred miles. Area number two, using prompts to make it act in a bad or malicious manner. Prompts can be used very helpfully to make ChatGPT give you better answers. But if the wrong prompt is given, the algorithm can behave in a way that's liable to produce incorrect, malicious, or downright dangerous behavior. One example of this is the attempt called Dan. You can find that on the internet. Now, these loopholes are being closed by OpenAI every time they become aware of them, but there's essentially a limitless amount of ways you can create these prompts. So it's never going to be fully protected from this sort of attack. However, if you do challenge ChatGPT on the truthfulness of its answers, it will admit that it's wrong and try and correct itself wherever possible. That's something that even a lot of humans aren't prepared to do. So Maybe there's something we can learn from the AI after all. And that's it for our video on ChatGPT. If you found any of this content interesting, why don't you check out our free short course on data analytics available in the description below? Why don't you try and use ChatGPT with that course to see if it can help you better understand the key concepts and terminology involved in data analytics. As you can see, this video was a little different from the content we normally produce. Let us know in the comments whether you thought it was good or if you'd like anything improved in future videos. And as always, feel free to subscribe for the best new content on data analytics and other areas in the CareerFoundry channel. And for those of you looking to get your foot in the door with a first data analyst job, why don't you check out this video on how to build the perfect portfolio to land you that all-important data analytics. That's the last word. To land you that all-important data analytics interview. Check it out here. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.